It was one of those ordinary afternoons that feel like they'll stretch on forever. Sunlight slanting through the kitchen window, laundry humming in the dryer, the smell of leftover soup warming on the stove. She'd just finished grading a stack of essays from her 10th grade class and was thinking about calling her daughter to see if she wanted to grab ice cream after practice. Soccer practice, Tuesdays and Thursdays, always at 4. Rain or shine, her girl never missed it. She'd been playing since she was 6, all scraped knees and muddy cleats and that bright, breathless laugh when she'd score a goal or pull off some fancy move she'd practiced for weeks. She glanced at the clock, 4:37 p.m. Practice should have ended 10 minutes ago. She figured maybe the coach ran late, or her daughter was helping clean up the field again. She was always the last one to leave, always offering to carry extra gear or tie someone's shoelaces when they came undone. That was just how she was. Thoughtful, steady, the kind of kid other parents wish their own children would be more like. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Not a call, a text, from the team group chat. Is everyone okay? Her stomach dropped before her brain even caught up. She tapped into the chat, fingers suddenly clumsy. Coach called 911. She collapsed on the field. No one saw it coming. Paramedics are here. She didn't read the rest. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered onto the tile floor. Her legs moved before she could think, out the front door, down the driveway, into the car. She didn't remember buckling her seatbelt. She didn't remember stopping at red lights. All she saw was the soccer field, the green grass, the white lines, and her daughter lying somewhere in the middle of it, still. By the time she screeched into the parking lot, sirens were fading in the distance. A small crowd had gathered near the gate. Parents, players, a few teachers. Someone saw her and rushed over, arms out, voice low and urgent. They took her to St. Mary's. She's stable, they think. They don't know what happened. Stable. The word felt like a lifeline. She nodded, mumbled thanks, and drove to the hospital with her hands gripping the wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. In the ER waiting room, everything was too bright, too loud, too slow. Nurses moved like ghosts behind the desk. A TV played a game show no one was watching. She sat in a plastic chair that creaked every time she shifted, staring at the double doors marked authorized personnel only, willing them to open and someone, anyone, to tell her it was all a mistake. An hour passed. Then 2. A doctor finally came out, young, tired-eyed, holding a clipboard like it might shield him from what he had to say. He sat beside her, not across, and that's when she knew. "I'm so sorry," he began, voice gentle but firm. "We did everything we could." Her heart. There was an undetected condition, something called arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy. It's rare, often shows no symptoms until it's too late. The words didn't make sense at first. Hart, her daughter? The girl who ran 5 miles before breakfast on weekends? Who danced in the kitchen while making pancakes? Whose laugh could fill an entire room? But she was fine this morning, she whispered, as if saying it might undo the last few hours. She kissed me goodbye. She said, "Don't forget to water my succulents." The doctor nodded slowly. Sometimes with conditions like this, there are no warning signs. It can happen suddenly without any prior indication. She didn't cry then, not right away. The tears would come later, in waves and gasps in the middle of the night when the house was silent and the bed felt too big. Right then, she just felt hollow, like someone had reached inside her chest and pulled out everything that mattered, leaving only a cold, echoing space. The drive home was a blur. She remembered stopping at a red light and seeing her daughter's water bottle in the passenger seat, half full, with a faded sticker of a cartoon owl on the side. She picked it up, held it to her chest, and sobbed quietly until the light turned green. The next few days passed in a haze of phone calls, casseroles left on the porch, and well-meaning neighbors offering hugs and Kleenex. People kept saying things like, "She's in a better place," or "God needed another angel," but none of it helped. It all felt like noise. What she needed was her daughter's voice, her footsteps on the stairs, the way she'd hum off-key while brushing her hair, the little sigh she made when she finally understood a tough math problem. The funeral was small, just family and close friends. The sky was gray, but it didn't rain, just hung heavy and quiet like the whole world was holding its breath. She wore her daughter's favorite sweater, the soft blue one with the tiny holes at the cuffs from being pulled too many times. It still smelled like her, like coconut shampoo and the vanilla body spray she'd gotten for her last birthday. After the service, people lingered, offering condolences, but she barely heard them. She kept looking toward the road, half expecting to see her daughter walking up late as usual with that sheepish grin and an excuse about traffic or a flat tire. But the road stayed empty. Back home, the silence was unbearable. Every room felt haunted by absence. Her daughter's bedroom door was closed, just as she'd left it that morning. Backpack by the bed, sneakers kicked off by the closet, a half-finished sketch on the desk. She hadn't been able to go in yet. Not really. She'd peeked once just to check if the window was open, but the sight of the unmade bed, the dent in the pillow where her head had rested, sent her stumbling back into the hallway, hand over her mouth. But by the end of the week, she knew she had to start. Not because she was ready, but because the house couldn't stay frozen in time. Life cruelly kept moving. Bills came in the mail. The fridge needed restocking. The lawn was growing too long, and somewhere in that room was her daughter's laptop, her school ID, maybe a letter from college admissions she'd been waiting for, things that needed to be dealt with. So one Saturday morning, with the sun streaming through the kitchen window just like that terrible Tuesday, she made a cup of tea, her daughter's favorite kind, chamomile with honey, and walked slowly down the hall. She stopped outside the bedroom door, hand hovering over the knob. She took a deep breath, turned it, and stepped inside. The room smelled like dust and faint traces of perfume. Posters still hung on the walls. Bands she'd never heard of. Quotes about courage and stars. A map of the world with little red pins marking places she'd dreamed of visiting. A stuffed rabbit sat propped against the pillow, one ear flopped over like it was tired. On the nightstand, a framed photo of the two of them at the beach last summer, her daughter mid-laugh, sand in her hair, arms wrapped around her mom's shoulders like she never wanted to let go. She sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping slightly under her weight. For a long time she just looked around, taking in every detail. The books stacked neatly on the shelf, the collection of smooth stones from hiking trips, the dried flower tucked into the mirror frame. Each object held a memory, a moment she'd never get back. She started small. She folded the clothes piled on the chair. She emptied the pencil case on the desk, sorting pens and highlighters into a box. She opened the closet and ran her fingers over the jackets and dresses, each one carrying the ghost of her daughter's presence. It was slow, painful work. Every item felt like a goodbye. But she kept going because stopping meant facing the silence again, and she wasn't ready for that. Then late in the afternoon, she turned to the old wooden desk in the corner, the one her daughter had painted purple in middle school, much to her initial dismay. The drawers were full of notebooks, old report cards, ticket stubs from movies they'd seen together. She sorted through them carefully, setting aside anything that felt important. The bottom drawer was stuck. She tugged gently, then harder. It wouldn't budge. Frowning, she got down on her knees and peered inside. There was something blocking it, a small metal latch she'd never noticed before. It looked like it had been added later, maybe with a tiny padlock or a hidden mechanism. Her heart thudded oddly in her chest. Her daughter had never mentioned a locked drawer. She wasn't secretive, always left her phone on the table, shared stories about school without being asked, even showed her mom embarrassing childhood photos when friends came over. So why hide something? She ran her fingers along the edge of the desk, searching for a key. Nothing. She checked the pencil cup, the bookshelf, under the rug. Still nothing. Just as she was about to give up, her eyes landed on the bookshelf again, on a well-worn copy of a novel her daughter had read at least 3 times. She pulled it down. The pages were soft from use, the spine cracked in 2 places. She flipped it open, and there, tucked between chapters 12 and 13, was a small brass key. Her hands shook as she took it. It was cool and smooth, worn from handling. She knelt back down, inserted the key into the tiny hole on the drawer's front, and turned it. There was a soft click. The drawer slid open easily now. Inside, there was only one thing: a white envelope. Plain, unmarked except for 2 words written in her daughter's familiar looping handwriting. For Mom. She stared at it. Her breath caught. She didn't open it right away. She just held it in both hands, feeling the weight of it, the promise and the pain it might contain. Outside, a bird chirped. A car drove by. The world kept turning, but in that quiet room, time seemed to stop. She knew deep down that whatever was inside would change everything, that this wasn't just a note about forgotten homework or a birthday wish. This felt heavier, more final, Still, she didn't open it. Not yet. She placed it carefully on the bed, stood up, and walked to the window. She looked out at the backyard, the swing set they'd never taken down, the garden her daughter had helped plant last spring, now blooming with yellow daisies. She took a long, slow breath. Then she turned back, picked up the envelope, and sat down on the bed again. This time, she opened it. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Just a few sheets of paper inside maybe, but it weighed like stone in her hands. She sat on the edge of the bed, sunlight catching the dust motes swirling in the air like tiny aimless stars. Her fingers trembled as she turned the envelope over. There was nothing else written on it. No date, no explanation. Just those two words. For Mom. She'd read them a dozen times already, as if the handwriting might change, soften, offer some clue about what waited inside. But it stayed the same, familiar, looping, the way her daughter had signed birthday cards and permission slips and silly notes left on the fridge. Gone to the library. Back by 5, love you. She took a slow breath, the kind you take before jumping into cold water. Then she slid her thumb under the flap and tore it open. The paper inside was plain white, the kind from a school notebook, slightly crumpled at the edges like it had been folded and unfolded many times. She unfolded it carefully as if it might tear from too much handling, and began to read. At first the words seemed ordinary, a greeting. A few lines about how much she loved her mom, how grateful she was for everything. For the pancakes on Sundays, for driving me to every practice, for never making me feel like I had to be perfect. Her throat tightened. She'd always tried to be that kind of parent, steady, supportive, never pushing too hard. Or so she thought. But then the tone shifted. I need to tell you something I've been too scared to say out loud. Her breath hitched. She read the next sentence twice, then a third time, as if her eyes were playing tricks on her. For over a year now, I've been feeling empty, not sad exactly. More like I'm watching my life from behind glass, like I'm acting in a play where everyone else knows their lines, but I forgot mine. She stopped reading. Her chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a belt around her ribs and pulled it too tight. She looked up, blinking hard, as if the room itself might offer an answer. But the room was silent. The stuffed rabbit still leaned against the pillow. The daisies outside still swayed in the breeze. She forced herself to keep going. I didn't want to worry you. You've done so much for me, working late, helping with college apps, always asking if I'm okay. And I kept saying I was fine because I didn't want you to think you failed me. You didn't, it's not your fault. It's just something inside me I can't fix on my own. Her vision blurred. Tears spilled over hot and sudden, landing on the page. She wiped them away quickly, afraid of smudging the ink, as if preserving the words might somehow bring her daughter back. She read about sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, about panic rising in her chest during class like a tide she couldn't stop, about canceling plans with friends because the thought of pretending to be happy felt exhausting, about scrolling through her phone at 3 a.m., reading stories of other kids who felt the same way, looking for proof she wasn't broken. I went to the school counselor twice, the letter said. She was kind. She gave me breathing exercises and said I should talk to you, but I couldn't. Every time I tried, the words got stuck. I'd picture your face, how you'd look at me with that worried frown, and I'd chicken out. I didn't want to be the kid with problems. I wanted to be the one who made you proud. She let out a small broken sound, half sob, half gasp. She'd seen her daughter come home tired, sure. Moody sometimes, like any teenager. But she'd chalked it up to stress, to hormones, to the chaos of senior year. She'd asked, everything okay? And gotten a shrug and a yeah, just tired. She'd believed it. Why wouldn't she? Her daughter had always been strong, the kind who bounced back, but now, reading these words, she realized how much she hadn't seen, how much had been hidden behind smiles and I'm fines. Then came the part that made her stomach drop like a stone. A few months ago, I tried to end it just once. I had the pills in my hand. I sat on the bathroom floor for an hour crying. But then I thought about you coming home and finding me like that. And I couldn't do it. I flushed them. I promised myself I'd get help. I really meant it. The paper shook in her hands. She dropped it onto her lap, pressing both palms against her eyes as if she could push the image away. Her daughter, alone, scared, sitting on a cold tile floor holding pills, thinking the world would be better without her. And she hadn't known. Not a single clue. Guilt crashed over her like a wave. She should have noticed. She should have pushed harder, asked more, stayed up later, listened better. She replayed every conversation, every missed sign, every time she'd accepted "I'm fine" at face value. Each one now felt like a failure. She picked up the letter again, her vision swimming, and read the final lines. If you're reading this, something must have happened. Maybe I got sick. Maybe it was an accident. I hope it was quick. I hope it didn't hurt, but if it's because of my heart, or something else, please don't blame yourself. Please don't spend your life wondering what you could have done differently. You were the best mom anyone could ask for. I carried this quietly because I didn't want to burden you. But I want you to know the real me, the whole me, not just the version I showed the world. At the very bottom, in smaller writing, like an afterthought. P.S. I started writing in a journal again. It's under the mattress, not because I want you to read it, but if you need to, it's there. She sat there for a long time, the letter resting on her knees, the afternoon light slowly shifting across the floor. The house was quiet, but inside her head a storm raged. Grief, shock, regret, love, all tangled together like knotted yarn. She didn't move for nearly an hour. She just sat, breathing, letting the truth of the letter sink in. Her daughter hadn't just been tired. She'd been drowning. And no one, not her friends, not her teachers, not even her own mother, had seen her go under. Eventually, she folded the letter carefully, the creases matching the original ones as best she could. She placed it back in the envelope and held it against her chest as if she could absorb her daughter's voice through the paper. Then, slowly, she got up and walked to the bed. She knelt down, lifted the edge of the mattress, and felt underneath. Her fingers brushed against something smooth and rectangular. A small cloth-bound notebook, navy blue, with a frayed ribbon bookmark. She pulled it out. It was heavier than she expected. She opened it to the first page. The date was from over a year ago. The handwriting was the same, but looser, less guarded. She didn't read it then. Not yet, she wasn't ready. But she tucked it under her arm, along with the envelope, and walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind her. That night, she made tea, chamomile with honey, and sat at the kitchen table with the journal in front of her. The house was dark except for the lamp above the sink. Outside, crickets sang. A neighbor's dog barked once, then fell silent. She opened the journal to the first entry. "Today, I cried in the shower so Mom wouldn't hear. I don't even know why. Everything's fine. School's fine. Friends are fine. But I feel like I'm wearing a mask and it's getting heavier every day." She read for an hour, then 2. Page after page, her daughter poured out fears, hopes, small joys. A funny thing a classmate said, the way the sunset looked over the soccer field, how proud she felt after finishing a tough assignment. There were days she wrote, "I think I'm getting better," and others where she admitted, "I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending." But mixed in with the darkness were sparks of light, real, honest moments of happiness. A surprise visit from her childhood best friend, baking cookies with her mom and burning half the batch, getting accepted into her dream college's early program. "Mom cried when I told her," she wrote. "I've never seen her so happy. Made it all worth it. She wasn't just sad. She wasn't just broken. She was a whole person, complicated, trying, loving, struggling, hoping. And she'd been fighting alone, yes, but fighting." The next morning, she called the school. She asked to speak with the counselor her daughter had seen. The woman remembered her immediately. "She came in twice," she said gently. She seemed thoughtful, articulate. She talked about pressure, college, expectations, feeling like she had to be on all the time. She said she didn't want to disappoint her mom. "I encouraged her to talk to you, to consider seeing someone outside of school. She said she would. I never saw her again. Did she seem in danger?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. There were no red flags that rose to the level of immediate concern, the counselor said carefully. "But in hindsight, maybe I should have reached out to you. We walk a fine line with confidentiality and safety. I wish I'd known." They talked for a while. The counselor offered resources, grief support groups, even a therapist who specialized in parental loss and teen mental health. She took down the numbers, thanked her, and hung up. Later that day, she visited two of her daughter's closest friends. They came to the door with red eyes and hesitant smiles. Over cups of hot chocolate on the porch they talked. She seemed off sometimes, one admitted. Like she'd be laughing one minute and the next she'd go quiet. Like she'd disappeared somewhere inside her head. But she never said anything was wrong, the other added. When we asked, she'd just say, "It's nothing. Just tired." We figured it was senior stress. They shared stories, sleepovers, road trips, inside jokes that made her laugh through tears. They remembered how her daughter always made sure no one ate lunch alone, how she'd stay after practice to help newer players, how she cried during the last episode of that show about time travel. She was the glue, one of them said softly. We didn't realize how much until she was gone. She hugged them both before they left, holding on a little longer than usual. "Thank you," she said, "for being her friends, for loving her." After they left, she sat on the porch swing, journal in her lap. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. She thought about everything she'd learned in the past 2 days. The letter, the journal, the conversations her daughter hadn't wanted to die. She'd wanted to feel okay. She'd wanted to be seen, not as the perfect student, the star athlete, the easygoing kid, but as someone who hurt sometimes, who needed help, who was trying her best, and no one had known how to help her, not because they didn't care, but because she'd hidden it so well. That realization didn't bring peace, not yet. But it brought something else, clarity. A purpose, maybe. She couldn't change the past. She couldn't undo the silence or the missed signs. But she could make sure her daughter's story wasn't buried with her. She could make sure other parents didn't sit in this same kitchen, holding a letter they never knew they'd need to read. She opened the journal again, not to the beginning, but to a random page near the end. "Today, I told Mom I got into the writing program. She hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. And for a second, just a second, I felt like I belonged here. Like maybe I'm not just faking it. Maybe I'm actually enough." She traced the words with her finger, smiling through tears. "You were enough," she whispered to the empty air. "You always were." And for the first time since that Tuesday afternoon, she didn't feel entirely alone. The days after reading the letter and the journal blurred together like watercolors left out in the rain. She moved through the house like a ghost, making coffee she didn't drink, folding laundry that stayed folded, staring at the TV without hearing a word. But something had shifted. The grief was still there, sharp and heavy, but now it carried a new weight. Understanding. And with understanding came questions. Questions she couldn't answer alone. She kept the journal on the kitchen table, open to a different page each morning like a kind of quiet ritual. Some entries made her laugh. A story about trying to dye her hair purple and ending up with green streaks. Others made her cry so hard she had to stop and just breathe. But every page showed a side of her daughter she'd never fully seen. Thoughtful, scared, hopeful, exhausted, loving. A real person, not just the bright, capable girl everyone remembered. One afternoon, while flipping through an older section of the journal, she found a folded piece of paper tucked between the pages. It wasn't part of the daily entries. This one was typed, printed neatly with a school letterhead at the top. Her heart jumped. She unfolded it carefully. It was a referral form from the school counselor, dated 3 months before her daughter passed. At the bottom, in her daughter's handwriting, was a note. Called the clinic. "First appointment next week. I'm going to do this." She stared at the words. So she hadn't tried. She'd taken that step. She'd reached out, but then nothing. No follow-up notes in the journal about the appointment. No mention of therapy or medication or even how she felt after calling. Just silence. She grabbed her phone and dialed the number on the form. After a few transfers, she reached the intake coordinator at the mental health clinic. "I'm calling about my daughter," she said, voice steadier than she felt. "She was referred here last fall. I'm trying to understand. Did she ever come in?" There was a pause. Then gently, "I can't share specific records without proper authorization, but I can tell you this. Her appointment was scheduled, but she never showed up. We tried calling once, but there was no answer. We assumed she'd decided not to pursue care." She thanked the woman and hung up. So close. She'd been so close to getting help. But something, fear, shame, The belief that she should be able to handle it alone had stopped her from walking through that door. That night, she sat at the kitchen table with a notebook of her own. Not to write memories, but to write questions. What signs had she missed? What could schools do better? Why did so many kids suffer in silence? And most painfully, how could she have known? She thought back to the weeks before her daughter passed. She remembered her staying in her room more, skipping dinner once or twice, saying she wasn't hungry. She'd seemed quieter, but senior year was stressful. College apps, final exams, saying goodbye to friends. She'd chalked it all up to that. But now she wondered, had her daughter been waiting for her to notice? Had she dropped hints she hadn't recognized? She flipped to a journal entry from that time. Told Mom I was tired again. She said, "You're working too hard, just rest this weekend." I wanted to say, it's not about rest. It's like my bones are heavy, but I didn't. She looked so tired herself. I didn't want to add to her load. Her chest ached. Her daughter had been protecting her. All this time she'd been shielding her mom from her pain, thinking it was kindness, but it had cost her everything. The next morning she drove to the high school. Not for a meeting, just to walk the halls. She went during lunch when the place buzzed with noise and movement. She stood near the courtyard watching kids laugh, argue, share fries, scroll on their phones. She looked for the ones sitting alone, the ones with tired eyes or forced smiles. How many of them were carrying invisible weights? She spotted a girl sitting by herself on a bench, head down, picking at her sandwich. She looked up once, eyes hollow, then looked away. Something in that glance reminded her so much of her daughter's journal sketches. Those tired, distant eyes. She didn't approach her. She didn't know her, but she made a mental note. This is why it matters. Later that week, she called the school principal. She didn't want pity. She wanted change. "I read my daughter's journal," she said when he answered. She was struggling. She tried to get help, but the system didn't catch her. "I don't want another family to go through this." The principal was quiet for a moment. Then, "Tell me what you're thinking." They met the following Monday in his office. She brought the journal, not to show him private entries, but to explain the gap between what her daughter felt and what anyone saw. She talked about the referral form, the missed appointment, the culture of just push through it that seemed to hang over the school like fog. "We teach kids algebra and history," she said, leaning forward. "But we don't teach them how to ask for help when their mind feels like it's breaking. And when they do ask, the path to real support is confusing, slow, or scary." He listened. Really listened. He didn't make excuses. Instead, he asked, "What would have helped? What do you think we should do?" She hadn't come with a full plan, but she had ideas. Mandatory mental health check-ins, not just for kids in crisis, but for everyone, like vision or hearing screenings. Training for teachers to spot subtle signs of distress. A peer support group where kids could talk without fear of judgment. And most importantly, making it normal. Normal. To say, "I'm not okay." By the end of the meeting, they'd agreed to form a small committee. Her, the counselor, 2 teachers, and a student rep. They'd call it the Wellness Initiative. Their first goal, review every step a student takes when they ask for mental health support, and simplify it. That night, she felt something she hadn't in months. Purpose. Not the kind that erases grief, but the kind that gives it direction. But the real turning point came a few days later, when she was cleaning out the closet in her daughter's room. She'd been putting clothes into donation bags, jeans, hoodies, that soft blue sweater, when she found a shoebox tucked behind a stack of winter boots. It was labeled in marker, "Stuff I can't throw away." Inside were small treasures, a movie ticket from their first mother-daughter date, a seashell from their beach trip, a dried corsage from homecoming, a note that read, "You're my favorite person. Me, age 10. And at the very bottom, wrapped in a bandana, was a small digital voice recorder. She turned it over in her hands. She'd forgotten about this. Her daughter had gotten it for a journalism elective sophomore year. She'd used it to interview neighbors for a class project, then kept it for ideas, she'd said. Curious, she pressed play. At first, just static. Then her daughter's voice, so clear, so alive, filled the quiet room. "Okay, testing. Mom, if you're hearing this, hi. I don't know why I'm recording this. Maybe because talking out loud feels safer than writing sometimes. Or maybe I just miss your voice when you're at work." She froze. The sound of that voice, warm, a little shy, so real, hit her like a physical blow. She sank onto the floor, clutching the recorder. Today was hard. I bombed my chem test. Not because I didn't study, I did for hours. But my mind just blanked, like someone pulled the plug. Coach yelled at me during drills because I wasn't focused. I wanted to tell her my brain feels like static, but I just nodded and said sorry. She paused the recording, tears streaming. She hadn't known about the test. Her daughter had come home that day smiling, said everything was fine. She pressed play again. But then, on the bus home, Maya sat next to me and shared her gummy worms without asking. And for like 5 minutes, I forgot to feel heavy. So, good things still happen. I just wish they lasted longer. There were more recordings, dozens of them. Short clips mostly. Some were silly. Her singing off-key to a pop song imitating their grumpy cat. Others were raw. I looked in the mirror today and didn't recognize myself. Like, who is that tired girl? I used to love drawing self-portraits. Now I can't even look long enough to start. And then one that made her catch her breath. I told Mom I got into the summer writing program. She cried. I felt so guilty. Because part of me was happy, but another part just felt numb. Like I'm watching someone else live my life. I don't know how to tell her that. She's so proud. I don't want to ruin it. She listened to that one 3 times. Each time it broke her heart a little more, but also showed her something vital. Her daughter wanted to connect. She just didn't know how to bridge the gap between her inner world and the one she showed everyone else. Later that evening, she sat on the porch with the recorder in her lap. The neighborhood was quiet. Fireflies blinked in the yard. She thought about all the things her daughter had carried alone. The fear of disappointing her, the shame of not being strong enough, the belief that her pain was a burden. But it wasn't a burden. It was a signal, a cry for connection, and now she had a choice. Let that signal fade into silence, or amplify it. The next morning, she called the local community center. She asked if they'd be open to hosting a parent workshop on teen mental health, what to look for, how to talk about it, where to find help. The woman on the phone sounded surprised but interested. We get so many calls from worried parents, she said, but most don't know where to start. Exactly, she replied. Let's help them start. She spent the next week gathering resources, hotlines, therapist directories, school policies. She read articles, watched webinars, even joined an online support group for parents who'd lost children to mental health crises. She wasn't looking for answers anymore. She was looking for tools. One night, while organizing her notes, she came across a quote her daughter had written in the back of her journal. Healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about learning to hold the pieces with kindness. She read it aloud, then wrote it on a sticky note and put it on her mirror. She wasn't trying to fix her grief. She was learning to carry it, along with her daughter's truth, in a way that honored both. A few days later, she received an email from the school. The Wellness Initiative had its first official meeting scheduled. They'd secured funding for a pilot program, weekly wellness check-ins during homeroom, anonymous question boxes in every classroom, and a student-led mental health awareness week. She printed the email and pinned it to the fridge, right next to the old grocery list her daughter had scribbled the week she died. Milk, eggs, oatmeal, love you. She smiled through tears. Her daughter's voice was still here, not just in recordings or journals, but in the changes starting to ripple through the place she'd called home. And for the first time, she felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was building something her daughter would have been proud of. She picked up the voice recorder one last time that night. She pressed play on the final clip, a short one recorded just 2 weeks before she passed. Today I helped a freshman find her classroom. She looked so lost. I remembered how that felt. But showing her the way, it made me feel useful, like maybe I'm not just taking up space. Maybe I matter. She closed her eyes, listening to the quiet hum after her daughter's voice faded. You mattered, she whispered, every single day. And now, because of her, others would know they mattered too. The first parent workshop was held on a rainy Thursday evening in the community center's small meeting room. She arrived early, heart pounding like she was the one about to give a presentation instead of just sharing her story. She set up folding chairs in a circle, No podium, no stage, because this wasn't about her being an expert. It was about being honest. Only 6 people showed up. A young dad with tired eyes, 2 moms who looked like they hadn't slept in weeks, a grandmother raising her grandson, and a high school teacher she vaguely recognized from the soccer games. They sat quietly, sipping coffee from paper cups, glancing at each other like they weren't sure why they'd come. She didn't start with statistics or slides. She just sat down with them and said, "My daughter passed away 3 months ago. She was healthy, happy, full of plans. Or so I thought." She told them about the letter, about the journal, about the voice recordings. She didn't hide her guilt, how she'd missed the signs, how she'd believed "I'm fine" every time. She talked about the crushing realization that her daughter had been fighting a battle no one could see. "I thought I knew her," she said, voice soft but steady, "but I only knew the version she let me see, and she hid the rest because she didn't want to worry me." The room was silent except for the sound of rain tapping on the windows. Then the young dad cleared his throat. "My son, and he's 15. He's stopped playing guitar. Used to play every night. Now his room's just quiet. I asked if everything's okay. He says yes, but it doesn't feel like yes." One of the moms nodded. "My daughter cries in the shower. I hear her through the wall, but when I ask, she says it's allergies." The teacher spoke up. "I've had 3 students this year come to me saying they don't want to wake up in the morning. I didn't know what to do. I sent them to the counselor, but is that enough?" That's when she realized this wasn't just her story. It was theirs too. The silence, the pretending, the fear of saying the wrong thing, it was everywhere. She passed out a simple handout. 10 things you can say instead of "Are you okay?" Things like, "I've noticed you seem quieter lately, want to talk?" Or, "It's okay to not be okay. I'm here." She shared the number for the teen crisis text line, the local free counseling services, even a list of books that helped her understand anxiety and depression better. But more than the resources, it was the space she created that mattered. For 2 hours, no one judged. No one offered quick fixes. They just listened. They shared. They cried. And for the first time, they didn't feel alone. Afterward, the grandmother hugged her. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't know it was okay to ask for help for him. Or for me." That night, she went home and wrote in her own journal for the first time since her daughter passed. Not about grief, but about hope. "Tonight, 6 people left a little less afraid." That's something. The workshop became monthly. Attendance grew. Soon the school asked if she'd speak at a staff training. She agreed, but only if students could be part of the conversation too. So they organized a student panel. 5 teens, some who'd struggled, some who'd supported friends, sat in front of the teachers and shared what they wished adults understood. One girl said, "When I say I'm tired, I don't mean I need more sleep. I mean my brain won't stop racing," a boy added. "We don't want you to fix us. We just want you to sit with us in the dark for a while." The teachers listened. Really listened. Afterward, one veteran educator pulled her aside. "I've been teaching for 25 years, he said, eyes wet. "I thought I knew my students, but I've been missing so much." Around the same time, the Wellness Initiative launched its pilot program at the high school. Every Monday during homeroom, students filled out a 1-question slip. "On a scale of 1 to 5, how are you doing today?" No names, just numbers. If someone marked a 1 or 2 weeks in a row, a counselor would gently check in, not with pressure, just an open door. The anonymous question box filled up fast. "What if I feel sad but don't know why? Is it weak to need therapy? How do I help a friend who won't talk?" The counseling team answered them in a weekly newsletter, normalizing the questions, offering support without shame. She volunteered to help draft those responses. She'd read each question and think, "My daughter probably wondered this too." Then came the Mental Health Awareness Week. Posters went up with messages like, "It's okay to not be okay," and "Asking for help is brave." Students ran a kindness wall where anyone could post anonymous notes of support. There was a lunchtime open mic where kids read poems about anxiety, friendship, loss, and hope. She stood in the back of the cafeteria during the open mic, arms crossed, heart full. A quiet girl with glasses read a poem about feeling invisible until someone said, "Hey, you okay?" and stayed to listen. The room fell silent. Then applause, soft at first, then roaring. Afterward, a student approached her. You're her mom, right? She nodded. I was in her English class last year, the girl said, twisting her hands. She sat next to me when I failed my first essay. Didn't say anything. Just slid me a note that said, "You'll get it next time. I believe in you." She looked down. I still have it. They stood there for a moment, two strangers bound by one kind act. She saw people, the girl added softly. Even when they felt invisible, that night, she dug out the old shoebox again, the one labeled, "Stuff I Can't Throw Away." She added the girl's words to it, written on a napkin from the cafeteria. She didn't need to keep everything, but some things were too precious to lose. As the weeks passed, something unexpected happened. Her grief didn't shrink, but it changed shape. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was fuel. Every time a parent emailed to say the workshop helped them talk to their child, every time a teacher told her a student finally asked for help, every time she saw a kid drop a note in the question box, it felt like her daughter's kindness was still rippling outward. She started visiting the school more often, not as a grieving parent, but as a partner. She helped design a mental health first aid training for staff. She worked with the art department to create a mural in the hallway, a tree with roots made of words like courage, hope, you matter. One afternoon, while helping hang the mural, she overheard two freshmen talking. "Did you see the new counselor hours?" one asked. "She's available during lunch now." "Yeah," the other said. "My friend went last week. Said it helped." They walked off, backpacks slung over one shoulder, voices fading down the hall. Normal, casual, like asking for help was just part of life. That's when it hit her. This was what her daughter had needed. Not a dramatic rescue, but a world where it was safe to say, "I'm not okay," and know someone would listen without flinching. She called the school counselor one evening, not for updates, but just to talk. "I keep wondering," she said, "if she knew how much she was loved. If she felt it, even on the hard days." There was a long pause. Then the counselor said, "In her second visit, she told me something I'll never forget. She said, 'My mom looks at me like I'm her whole sky. I just wish I could feel like I deserve it.'" Her breath caught. "But she did deserve it," the counselor added gently. "And she knew it deep down. She just couldn't always feel it. That's the thing about depression, it lies to you, but love is still true even when you can't feel it." She cried that night, not from sadness, but from a strange, quiet peace. Her daughter had known she was loved. That was enough. More than enough. A few days later, she received a letter from the school board. The wellness initiative was being expanded to all 3 high schools in the district. They wanted to name the student support fund after her daughter. She almost said no. It felt too big, too public. But then she remembered the journal entry. Maybe I'm not just taking up space. Maybe I matter. Yes, she thought. You mattered. And you still do. She said yes. The dedication ceremony was held in the spring, under the same soccer field lights where her daughter had played her last game. Students, teachers, parents gathered near the new wellness room, a quiet space with soft chairs, books, and a window that looked out onto the garden her daughter had helped plant. A plaque was unveiled. In memory of a student who cared deeply, spoke kindly, and reminded us all that it's okay to ask for help. No name, just her spirit. Afterward, a group of students handed her a small potted plant, a succulent with thick green leaves and tiny pink flowers. "She loved these," one said. "We thought you should have one too." She took it, fingers brushing the leaves. She remembered the morning of that Tuesday, the kiss goodbye, the reminder about the succulents. "Don't forget to water them, Mom." "I won't," she whispered. That evening, she sat on the porch with the new succulent on the railing beside her. The sky was clear, stars beginning to blink awake. She opened her daughter's journal to a random page and read, "Today I told a kid at lunch they could sit with us. They looked so relieved. Made me think, maybe healing isn't just something we do for ourselves. Maybe it's something we give each other, one small kindness at a time." She closed the journal and looked out at the yard. The daisies were blooming again. The swing set creaked in the breeze. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Life, stubborn and beautiful, kept going, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was just surviving the silence. She was learning to live inside it, with purpose, with love, and with the quiet certainty that her daughter's light hadn't gone out. It was just shining in new places now. The first anniversary came quietly, like a shadow slipping in through the back door. No fanfare, no warning, just a date on the calendar that made her stomach drop when she saw it. She'd woken up that morning to birdsong and soft sunlight, the kind of peaceful start that felt almost cruel. Because today wasn't peaceful. Today was the day the world had cracked open and never quite stitched itself back together. She didn't get out of bed right away. She lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. The hum of the fridge, the creak of old floorboards settling, the distant sound of a neighbor's lawnmower. All the ordinary sounds of a life that kept moving, even when part of her wished it would stop. But it wouldn't stop. And maybe she was starting to realize it shouldn't. She got up, made tea, chamomile with honey, just like always, and sat at the kitchen table with her daughter's journal open in front of her. Not to read, just to have it near. She traced the worn cover with her fingers, remembering how it had felt that first time she pulled it from under the mattress, like uncovering a secret language only her heart could understand. Later that morning, she drove to the school. It wasn't for a meeting or a workshop. She just needed to be there. The wellness initiative was in full swing now. Counselors had more hours, teachers had gone through mental health first aid training, and students ran a peer support club that met every Thursday. Posters with hopeful messages still lined the hallways, but they didn't feel like decorations anymore. They felt like promises. She walked through the empty halls. School was out for summer and stopped outside the wellness room. The door was open. Inside, a student she didn't recognize was organizing books on a shelf. The girl looked up and smiled. "Oh, you're her mom, right?" She nodded. The girl's eyes softened. "I'm part of the support club. We're getting ready for next year." We added a new section, books about grief, about losing someone you love. She pointed to a shelf with titles like When Someone You Love Is Gone and Letters to My Future Self. "I read your daughter's letter," the girl said quietly. "The one they shared during Awareness Week. It helped me tell my mom I needed help." She didn't know what to say, so she just said, "Thank you." For a moment, they stood there in the quiet room, two strangers connected by a truth that needed no explanation. Before she left, she placed a small envelope on the desk inside the wellness room. Inside was a note. "Keep listening. Keep showing up. You never know whose life you're saving." She didn't sign it. It didn't need a name. That afternoon, she went to the cemetery. She hadn't been in months, not because she didn't want to, but because it always felt like stepping into a room where time had stopped. But today she needed to go. She brought two things, a single daisy from the garden and a copy of that old novel, the one with the brass key tucked inside. She knelt by the headstone, brushed away a few fallen leaves, and set the book down gently. "I brought your favorite," she said, voice low but steady. "And I watered the succulents. They're doing great." She sat back on her heels and looked at the name carved in stone. It still didn't feel real. But then, nothing about this ever had. She told her about the workshop that now met twice a month. About the student who'd started a podcast on teen mental health. About the teacher who'd stayed after school to talk with a kid who'd marked 1 on their wellness slip for 3 weeks straight, and how that kid was now smiling. "Again, I think you'd be proud," she said, smiling through tears. "You started something. Not on purpose, maybe, but your truth. It's helping people. Every day." A breeze moved through the trees, rustling the leaves like a whisper. She closed her eyes and let it wash over her. On the drive home, she stopped by the bookstore. She bought 3 copies of that same novel, the one with the worn spine and the hidden key. One for the school library, one for the community center, and one for her own shelf. She wrote a note inside each. "If you're reading this and you're hurting, please know you're not alone, and it's okay to ask for help." That evening, she hosted a small gathering in her backyard. Just a few close friends, the counselor, 2 of her daughter's former teachers, and a handful of students from the support club. No speeches, no formal tribute, just food, soft music, and lanterns strung between the trees. People talked, laughed, shared stories. A girl played guitar, her daughter's favorite song, and for a moment, the whole yard fell quiet, not in sadness, but in remembrance. Later, as the sun dipped below the trees, someone lit a candle and placed it in the center of the table. One by one, they each said something simple. I miss you. Thank you for teaching me to listen. You're still with us. She didn't say much. She just held the candle's warmth in her hands and let the words settle around her like a blanket. After everyone left, she sat alone on the porch swing, wrapped in the quiet. The fireflies were out, blinking in the dusk like tiny stars come down to earth. She thought about how her daughter used to chase them as a kid, cupping them gently in her hands before letting them go. They're not meant to be kept, she'd say. They're meant to light up the dark for a little while. Maybe that's what her daughter had been too, a light. Brief, beautiful, and gone too soon. But the light hadn't vanished. It had scattered. Into the wellness room. Into the workshops. Into the quiet conversations between parents and kids that now started with, I've noticed you seem tired. Instead of, are you okay? She went inside and opened her own journal, the one she'd started months ago. She wrote, today wasn't about surviving. It was about honoring, not just her memory, but her message, that it's okay to be human, to hurt, to ask for help, and that kindness, even the smallest kind, can change everything. The next morning, she got an email from the district superintendent. The wellness initiative was being adopted by 5 more schools in neighboring towns. They wanted her to help train their staff. She said yes, but this time she didn't feel the old weight of guilt or the desperate need to fix what was broken. She felt something quieter, steadier, purpose. Not because she had all the answers, but because she'd learned to sit with the questions and to offer her hand to others who were asking them too. A few weeks later, she stood in front of a room full of teachers from another district. She didn't talk about her daughter's death. She talked about her life, her kindness, her quiet strength, her struggle, and her hope. She shared the letter, not as a tragedy, but as a call to pay closer attention, to listen deeper, to make space for the parts of people they don't always show. Afterward, a teacher approached her, eyes red. My son, he's been distant. I didn't know how to reach him. But after hearing you, I'm going to try something different tonight. Just sit with him, not fix. Just be there, she nodded. That's enough. Sometimes that's everything. As summer turned to fall, the work continued. She spoke at a regional education conference. She helped design a student-led mental health app for the district. She even started a small online group for parents who'd lost children, not to dwell in grief, but to turn it into action just like she had. And through it all, she kept living. She planted new flowers in the garden. She reorganized the kitchen cabinets. She laughed, real, full laughs, at silly things on TV. She missed her daughter every single day, but the missing didn't drown her anymore. It walked beside her like a quiet companion. One crisp October afternoon, she received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a handmade card from a high school 3 towns over. On the front, a drawing of a tree with deep roots and bright green leaves. Inside, in careful handwriting, because of your daughter's story, I told my counselor I was thinking about hurting myself. They helped me. I'm still here. Thank you. She held the card to her chest and cried, not from sorrow but from awe. Her daughter's voice, her truth, had traveled farther than either of them could have imagined. That night she went to the bookshelf and took down the copy of the novel she'd kept for herself. She opened it to the page where the key had once been hidden. She slipped the card inside, right between chapters 12 and 13. Then she placed the book back on the shelf, spine out, where it belonged. She didn't need to visit the cemetery to feel close to her daughter anymore. She felt her in the quiet courage of a student raising their hand to say, I need help, in the parent who finally asked, what's really going on, instead of accepting I'm fine. In the teachers who now paused mid-lesson to check in, not just on grades, but on hearts. Her daughter hadn't just left behind a letter. She'd left behind a legacy, one built not on perfection but on honesty. Not on silence, but on speaking up. Not on hiding pain, but on sharing it so others wouldn't feel alone. And in that legacy, she lived. As the seasons turned again, the house filled with new sounds. Laughter from students volunteering in the backyard garden, the ring of the phone with calls from parents seeking advice, the soft rustle of pages as she read new books on healing and hope. She still made chamomile tea with honey. She still talked to her daughter sometimes out loud like she might hear. And every time she passed the soccer field, she'd slow down just for a second and smile. Because the girl who'd once run across that grass with joy in her heart and cleats on her feet hadn't really left. She was in every kid who now knew it was okay to say, "I'm not okay." In every parent who listened without judgment. In every teacher who saw the quiet ones and reached out. She was in the light. And as long as that light kept shining, in schools, in homes, in hearts, she would never truly be gone. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of gold and rose, she sat on the porch with a new journal in her lap. She wrote just one line. "You taught me that love doesn't end. It changes shape, and today it looks like hope." Then she closed the book, leaned back in the swing, and watched the fireflies rise, one by one, into the gathering dark.